I now pronounce you husband and wife." The hall erupted in cheers. Guests rose to their feet as Elena and Daniel kissed, framed beneath a lavish floral arch of white orchids and red roses. The air smelled of champagne and sweat, laughter and lies. What no one noticed, not even the photographers, was the tension behind Elena's smile. Her cheeks were stiff. Her hands trembled slightly under her silk gloves. Because earlier that day, a photo had been slipped under her hotel room door. It was her fiancé, Daniel, kissing Melissa, her maid of honor. Elena Serrano came from a long line of attorneys and surgeons, elegant, precise, always in control. Her wedding was supposed to be the crowning moment of her perfect life. Everything had to be perfect: the imported orchids, the Michelin-starred chef, the string quartet playing Coldplay in classical rendition. Melissa Voss had been her best friend since college. Wild, charismatic, the one who always took things too far. And Daniel Reeds? A self-made entrepreneur who had swept Elena off her feet in 8 months flat. But that morning, everything snapped. The photo wasn't blurry. It wasn't a maybe. It was Daniel, hands on Melissa's waist. Melissa's arms curled around his neck. The timestamp said 2 weeks ago. Elena stared at the photo for a full 5 minutes before calmly placing it in her clutch. She still went to the ceremony. Still smiled. Still said, "I do." But everything that followed was no longer a celebration. It was a stage. A trap. A funeral in disguise. The enclosed reception hall was a masterpiece. Chandeliers hung like stars. The stage shimmered with cascading lights. And a 7-tier wedding cake stood like royalty at the far end of the room. Hundreds of guests danced, toasted, and posed for selfies. But Elena wasn't mingling. She was watching, tracking every move Daniel made. How often he looked over at Melissa. How Melissa bit her lip and sipped champagne in Daniel's direction. Their body language whispered more than their mouths ever could. Her father, Judge Serrano, raised his glass. "To the bride and groom, may your union be filled with truth and loyalty." Elena stared at Daniel as everyone clinked glasses. She gave him the sweetest smile she could summon. Daniel choked slightly. Melissa pulled Elena aside during dinner. Her voice was bubbly, but her eyes darted. "Are you okay?" "Better than ever," Elena replied, sipping her wine. Melissa touched her arm. "You're glowing." Elena leaned in, her voice a whisper. "So are you. You must be burning with something." For a moment, Melissa's smile dropped, but quickly recovered. "I just wanted it to be special. For you." The lie was too smooth. Practiced. Elena knew the affair hadn't ended. She also knew Melissa hadn't expected to be confronted. Not tonight, not like this. As the music kicked up again and Daniel joined his groomsmen for a toast, Elena slipped away to the vendor hallway and opened her clutch. Inside, along with her lipstick and mirror, was a small gun. At precisely 9:42 p.m., the MC announced, "It's time for the cake cutting." Guests cheered. Flashbulbs popped. The couple took center stage. Melissa stood nearby, holding the knife like an assistant, smiling as if she hadn't betrayed her best friend. Elena stepped beside Daniel, hand on his arm. She looked up at him and said, "Say cheese." That's when the power cut out. A blackout. Total darkness. The gasps echoed, followed by nervous laughter. Then, a single loud bang. And another. Screams filled the pitch-black hall. When the lights flickered back on seconds later, 2 bodies lay crumpled beside the wedding cake. Daniel. Melissa. Both dead. Elena stood over them, dress blood-splattered, holding a gun in one hand. Her veil was slightly askew. Her eyes were wide, locked onto something, or someone, behind the crowd. People screamed. Phones came out. Some guests ducked for cover. Others just stood frozen. But one thing was clear. Elena hadn't moved an inch since the blackout. Or so it seemed. David Cohen, a seasoned detective who happened to be among the guests, Elena's father's old friend, rushed forward. He yelled for someone to call 911 and for the DJ to cut the music, which was still playing ironically upbeat background jazz. But when he looked closely at Elena's expression, something gnawed at him. She looked shocked, as if the gun in her hand had been placed there. "Elena," he said, "did you shoot them?" She didn't answer. He took the weapon carefully from her grasp. "No recent firing residue," he muttered. "No burn marks on her dress." Before he could finish his sentence, a waiter suddenly bolted for the exit, dropping his tray and bumping into two guests. David's eyes snapped toward him. "That's not a waiter," he said under his breath. "Security, stop him!" The man disappeared into the kitchen doors as a few groomsmen gave chase. As sirens echoed in the distance, Elena finally whispered, "I didn't kill them. I was going to, but someone beat me to it." David turned toward the kitchen where the man had fled, then back at the wedding stage. 2 bodies, 1 bride, and a gun that hadn't been fired. The blackout hadn't just covered the crime. It had rearranged the truth. And what nobody knew yet was that the real killer might still be among them. Flashing red and blue lights reflected off the chandeliers of the once elegant wedding hall. Police cordoned off the scene. Guests were herded to one side of the ballroom, their silk gowns and tuxedos now stained with panic. The cake was still intact, but Daniel and Melissa weren't. Detective David Cohen knelt over the 2 bodies. 1 bullet wound each. Clean. Precise. He turned toward Elena, who sat in a folding chair by the wall, her hands bagged, her face blank. Her once elegant white dress was now rumpled and red splattered. "You said you were going to shoot them," David asked quietly. "But someone beat you to it?" She nodded once. "Yes." "Then why were you holding the gun?" "I blacked out," she whispered. There was a bang, then another. When the lights came back on, the gun was already in my hand. David studied her. "You were set up." Inside the mobile command unit parked outside, David and his team began piecing things together. The gun in Elena's hand had no fingerprints, not even hers. Gunshot residue tests showed no trace on her hands or dress. The bullets didn't match the caliber of the weapon found. "Elena didn't pull the trigger," David confirmed. "Someone wanted her to take the fall." "But who?" Melissa, it turned out, had more than one enemy. In her clutch, investigators found a second burner phone, loaded with dozens of deleted texts to an unknown number. A prenup draft with Daniel's signature, one Melissa had printed and redlined, as if preparing to replace Elena. Was Melissa trying to marry Daniel herself? David called in surveillance footage from the hallway cameras. Most were disabled during the blackout, except one. A grainy clip from just 10 minutes before the shooting showed someone in a catering uniform slipping through the side door. Zoom. Pause. Enhance. It wasn't a waiter. It was a woman. Blonde. Slender. Wearing gloves. And familiar. David's eyes narrowed. "That's not Staff. That's Carmen Voss, Melissa's sister." Carmen Voss, who was supposedly in London for work, was now seen inside the venue, sneaking around in disguise. David had her picked up the next morning. At first, she denied Everett. "Melissa was going to ruin everything," she spat. "She was going to elope with Daniel. She wanted Elena out of the picture." "So you killed them?" David asked. "I didn't plan to. But I brought the real gun. Thought I'd scare her. Then the lights went out, and I heard 2 shots. I panicked. Dropped my gun. I ran. And the gun Elena was holding? Planted. Swapped it out earlier in the hallway while everyone was dancing." David stared at her. "Then who fired the fatal shots?" Carmen looked up slowly. "I don't know. I thought it was me. But I didn't fire." Lab results confirmed it. Carmen's gun had not been fired. Now it was clear. There were 2 guns at the scene, but a third person had done the shooting. Someone else used the blackout to fire 2 deadly shots. Swap Elena's fake gun for Carmen's. Escape unseen. And that's when David noticed something strange in the guest list. A name that shouldn't have been there. Victor Lang. An alias. The real name? Vincent Reeds. Daniel's estranged brother. Vincent had been disowned by the Reeds family years ago over a failed business venture. Daniel had inherited everything: money, property, even the family name. Vincent vanished from public life. But not from resentment. Turns out, Melissa had reconnected with Vincent in secret. They were plotting something. Elena's photo wasn't slipped by accident, it was bait. To push her toward the edge. To make her a weapon. But Vincent had another plan. He'd sneaked into the wedding dressed as a waiter. Used the chaos of the blackout to eliminate both Daniel and Melissa. Why? Because Melissa betrayed him, too. She had told Daniel about their plan to ruin Elena, hoping he would choose her over Elena. Instead, Daniel called it off, planning to reconcile with Elena after the wedding. Vincent, enraged, decided no one deserved to live. David issued an APB on Vincent Reeds. He was caught 3 days later, hiding in an abandoned vineyard once owned by the Reeds family. The real weapon was recovered under a heating vent in the kitchen of the venue. Ballistics matched. Vincent confessed during interrogation. They were all liars. Elena was just in the way. But she was supposed to suffer, not survive. He was charged with double homicide, attempted framing, and premeditated conspiracy. Carmen Voss was sentenced to 18 months for obstruction and tampering. Elena? She was exonerated. But she didn't feel free. 6 months later, Elena stood in a quiet cemetery, placing 2 white roses, one for Daniel, one for the betrayal. The headlines had faded. Bride holds gun at wedding massacre. Love triangle ends in double murder. Wrong woman, right setup. Elena changed her name. Moved to a different city. She no longer wanted justice. She wanted peace. In her journal, she wrote, I wore white to mark a beginning. But I buried him in silence to end the lie. I didn't lose a husband. I survived a war. In emotionally charged moments, like discovering infidelity, your instincts may scream for action. But acting on rage alone can leave you vulnerable to manipulation, or worse, a setup. In emotionally charged moments, like discovering infidelity, your instincts may scream for action. But acting on rage alone can leave you vulnerable to manipulation, or worse, a setup. What to do instead? Secure evidence, but don't confront alone. If someone sends you compromising material, like the photo Elena received, verify its source and truth. Involve someone trustworthy, like a friend, therapist, or even legal counsel, before taking big steps. Watch for signs of manipulation. If things feel too well-timed or dramatic, like a sudden photo before a big event, ask, who benefits from me reacting emotionally? Avoid isolation when emotions run high. Stay around people you trust. Never confront someone in private, or while armed if you're highly emotional. Know your legal rights. If you feel you're being set up or threatened, speak to authorities before you become a suspect. Remember, anger can cloud judgment, and in the hands of the wrong person, that can be used against you.